earliest publication in art history was on the Haarlem painter named Pieter Jansz.Saenredam, who paints churches and town halls. And I knew of this painting by him in the museum in Budapest. I was born in New York in 1940. My mother came from Hungary. She moved there as a young child to the United States. But Hungary was always part of my upbringing. When I went to the house of my grandparents, they spoke Hungarian as well as Yiddish to each other, and so I heard the sound of the language from the time I was a child. But Hungary was so far in the past, in the years I grew up in the years of the Cold War. Eastern Europe, behind the Iron Curtain, was a place that was just part of history and not part of the present. So I was really moved and pleased when it started coming back into my life. And that started in 1970 when my mother visited me after I'd moved to Holland. I put her in our car and we drove off through Germany, through Austria to Budapest. And there we looked for the house where she had grown up in. We didn't find it, but we had a great adventure walking through the streets and being very moved by what we saw. Budapest in 1970 was still in the ruins of the Second World War, of the Russian invasion of 1956, and so we fell deeply into the mood of a place in a kind of despair. But there was not just despair, because as an art historian, I was fascinated by one particular painting in the collection, and that was a church interior by Pieter Jansz.Saenredam. In 1968, I had written my first article in art history on this artist, and I really wanted to see the painting that he made in a church in his own town. So I came to the museum. I introduced myself to the curators. I remember Susan Orbach and Therese Gersi, who are still alive and who still remember this and are still very moved to think of this young man coming to look for them and to introduce himself to them in the bitterest cold years of the Cold War. And it created a bond which still warms my heart.
And have you ever learned Hungarian words?
I knew some Hungarian words, but nobody else understands them. So my Aunt Bella, whenever she visited me, she would pinch my cheek and she would say, "Joj de édes," which I thought meant, "Aren't you cute?" But Hungarians don't seem to understand these words, so it's a kind of personal Hungarian that I learned.